I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about DC agency forms. There are 3 of them, which are listed here, plus an information guide that has been done by the DC Real Estate Commission that explains the difference between buyer and seller agency, dual agency, and designated agency. The first form that you would get if you're printing something out in Accelerate or Zip forms is going to be this disclosure of broker relationship. It's actually a form that you don't fill out until you know what property you're buying and where the other agency or the agent for the other side works. At the top, it says that this is a form that you give to the person you don't represent, and therefore they are acknowledging this. So if you're working with the buyer, you click here, check here that the buyer knows that the seller's agent that you fill in right here, and their license number if you know it, and their firm represents the seller. If that happens to be a firm, the firm is the same as your firm, such as Long & Foster, you also click in the designated agent for the seller, and then your buyers sign it. If you are writing a contract, you have this filled out, and you put down seller agent, your name, your license, your firm that you represent the buyer, and you include it with your contract, and the seller will then sign it as a part of the package. The very bottom of the page has who you give it to if people are refusing to sign it, and you, the licensee, sign it and date it if you're working with somebody who's afraid to sign anything. What you will sign early on is this consent for dual representation and designated representation in the District of Columbia. Now, Long & Foster does not like dual agency in the D.C. area. Dual agency in D.C. means you, the agent, represent both sides. It's different than the state of Maryland. So we suggest that you only fill out "we consent to designated representation," which means the company can represent both sides, but you fill in the company here, Long & Foster. They may represent both the buyer and the seller, or landlords and tenants, and that sales associate, you, and your license number will work as the designated representative of whatever party you're having signed. So if I'm working with the buyer, I do the buyer, and my buyers sign it down here. If it's a seller, the listing agent would fill it out and say Long & Foster or whatever other company, the agent's name, their license, and that they represent the seller. Also relates to landlords and tenants. If the buyers do not consent to this, then you check to designated representation, and that they don't do that, and you should not be showing listings that are listed within your company, because it's going to be very hard for you, or impossible for you, to represent your client and your brokerage to represent the client on the other side. And finally, if you are doing dual representation, which, as I said, Long & Foster does not like, you would then sign that and say that both sides agree to both, or you would say, I do not consent, and the people fill this out. This is what you should fill out when you take a listing, and this is what you should fill out when you are doing a buyer's package, because this is what gives you the right to show Long & Foster listings and to let Long & Foster agents show your listing. Then the third form is called the Washington, D.C. Disclosure Confirmation of Dual Representation and Designated Agency. This is what you do when you find a property that the person likes and it is listed with your firm, and so you put the property address, and then you put down the name of the firm that you are working with, Long & Foster, if it's both sides, And down here on the designated representation, it says that it has assigned whoever the listing agent is and their license number to represent the seller, and whoever the buyer's agent is and their license number to represent the buyer. And then you have the people sign it at the bottom. Once again, there is a right to a place to designate that dual brokerage is okay, but Long & Foster does not like that, so we say don't fill that part out. And if there's any questions, there is this brochure that the DC Real Estate Commission has done, which has all sorts of explanations about dual agency, designated agency, representing buyers and sellers. The most important part to remember is this basic form that you think you might need to sign when you first get a client is something that gets printed out and put in the back of your file, and you give it to the person you don't represent. This consent for dual representation is what you get filled out at the very early stages of your consultation. I'm Sarah Toppins with Long & Foster talking to you about DC agency.